Welcome, everybody, to Black and Gold Weekly, a weekly Boston Bruins show here on YouTube, brought to you in partnership with Black and Gold Productions. I am your host, John. This is episode 59, Timmy Schaller's number, and we've got a lot to talk about today, as there's a lot going on in the Bruins world as the NHL regular season continues along. We get closer and closer to playoff time. We've also got some signings to talk about with some college kids, and the trade deadline is only a few days away, so there's a lot going on here, a lot to get into. Back again is Danny. What's going on, man? Thank you so much for coming on and doing this show. As always, it's great to have you, and can't wait to talk some Bruins hockey.
My pleasure, and it seems like there's always something going on with the Bruins, right? Good or bad. And yeah, it was a busy week this week, and I think it worked in the Bruins' favor.
Yeah, absolutely. Another solid week. Boston continues to play really, really well, and we're certainly going to get into all of that. Before we start, I want to give a big thank you to Mark Allred and the entire team at Black and Gold Productions. This show would not be happening without them, so can't thank them enough for all their support and allowing this to take place. Also, want to draw your attention down to the description of the video. As always, there are 3 links down there. If you're in the market for Boston Bruins apparel, NHL apparel from any of the 32 teams, or NCAA college apparel, all there in the description. Check out those links. And there's a great variety of products, all team branded, all available. It would be really awesome if you could check those out if you're looking for any of those kinds of things. But let's get into it here, because we got a lot to talk about today. I guess we'll start off with the 2 college signings that Boston has made so far, now with the college seasons coming to an end, except for the teams that are going into the NCAA tournament. That opens up a lot of these kids to sign ELCs, which we've seen around the league, and Boston has gotten in on that as well. Then we're going to talk about the trade deadline and some possible trade targets for the Bruins. Obviously, deadline is less than a week away now, just coming up on Monday the 21st, so it's crunch time now. We're recording this on Wednesday. It won't be out until Friday, so hopefully nothing major happens between us recording this and when it actually comes out Friday, but I have a feeling there's a chance that things could change by the time this actually goes public. But again, we're talking about this from the perspective of Wednesday morning. And then we'll talk about the last few games for the Bruins and their upcoming schedule as well. So, Danny, big show this week, a lot to get into. Let's start with the signings of Michael Callahan and Mark Mclaughlin, both local kids playing in Hockey East. Callahan, who they traded for, was a 7th-round pick of the Arizona Coyotes, who they then have since traded for future considerations. And of now that Providence College's season is done, Callahan has signed with the Bruins on a 2-year entry-level deal that will kick in next season. He can play on an amateur tryout for the rest of this year down in Providence, possibly. So, Michael Callahan, longtime captain of Providence College, PC Friars. He's been one of their top defensemen his entire career there. And all in all, good defensive, steady D-man that's had a very solid college career, and now we're going to see if he can take that next step to the pros.
And when you look at his size, he's 6'2", and that's a very good size for a defenseman. He had 66 points in 134 games, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. And, he is not somebody that is going to be a point scorer, but he could potentially give the Bruins a solid defenseman. We've talked a lot about defensive depth on this show, and while Callahan may not make an immediate impact, this is a good depth signing to shore up, that type of, size defenseman and that type of talent.
Yeah, and he's a defensive guy. He's not going to be somebody that comes out and is a big scorer or an offensive defenseman. He's a defensive guy. But I think at the very least, this is certainly going to help out the Providence Bruins, because they're going to get another solid guy on the back end for down in Providence. Seventh round pick, it kind of remains to be seen if he ever becomes like a real full-time NHL player, but it's certainly possible. He's very solid defensively, a very smart player, and he has the size as well, which is important. But at the very least, I think he's certainly going to spend some time down in Providence and at least be an AHL defenseman and have a chance to put a solid AHL career together. And hopefully he's able to make that jump and become an NHLer. But if not, I think there's really no loss here for the Bruins. At least, he's going to get a shot. And he was a captain at Providence as well. So another leader type guy, a good locker room guy, good character guy. Those are the kinds of players that Boston tends to like a lot, and he fits the bill perfectly.
And he's sort of a project player, not in the sense that he can't play, but we're not really sure what his ceiling is, and he needs to be developed. And he has high upside, so I think this was a very interesting move for the Bruins because, they didn't give up much, as you said, and if he turns out to be a solid defenseman, that could be another low risk, high reward type of move. You mentioned, he was a captain, and that type of leadership, like you said, the Bruins have always looked for guys who are not afraid to put the team on their back and make an impact. So I'll be curious to see how this signing pans out. A lot of upside, and he's a Massachusetts native, I believe. So that will be fun to follow as well. Always love to see the local kids make the big time.
Yeah, speaking of local kids, the other college player that Boston has just signed is Mclaughlin from Boston College. And he was also a captain at BC. And he's a forward and another college signing here for the Bruins, a 2-year ELC that kicks in right away. So he'll I would assume immediately report to Providence and be playing for the Providence Bruins the rest of the way for their season. But Mclaughlin, everything I'm hearing about him is that he's kind of a very defensive sound, not a big scorer, but more of a defensive shutdown type forward, probably going to play center, I would imagine. And another interesting guy here that we don't really know what he's going to become, but at the very least, he's going to get some AHL time and get to see what he looks like there. And if best case scenario is able to come through, then he could end up being a bottom six forward up in Boston eventually. And just everything that I've read about him and seen about him is that he is just a very, very smart, solid, defensive-minded forward. And he's probably not going to do a whole lot offensively, but he can be a shutdown guy on the defensive side of things. And again, another guy that Boston, there's really no risk here. You just sign a kid out of college and see what you got. And if it doesn't work out, then, you just don't re-sign him. And if he does work out, you could get a pretty solid player out of it.
McLaughlin's interesting in the sense that he seemed to get better each season of his college career. In 2020, in the 2020-2021 season, he served as a team captain, as you mentioned, and he won the Hockey East Best Defensive Forward Award. And with the talent in the Hockey East, that award certainly means something because I view the Hockey East as kind of like the SEC in college football. That's the elite conference. So that award certainly means something. And I believe he had 24 points this last regular season. I would say, he's not refined, but there's definitely some elements to his game that are probably going to be staples of his game moving forward. This was another low risk, high reward signing. And I think that McLaughlin could really, I'm not sure what his overall ceiling is yet, of course, or if he'll make it to the Bruins, but I could see why the Bruins wanted to go after him and why he was one of the most coveted NCAA free agents.
Yeah, he had a lot of offers coming out of college this year. He had a great senior season, and it seems like, at the very least, again, you're going to get a guy for Providence. It's probably going to be a pretty good player down in Providence. It kind of, think It reminds me of Ryan Fitzgerald a little bit, who never really made it up to Boston, but was a great player down in Providence for years, and I think is still in the AHL. He's not with Providence anymore, but I think he's still in the AHL. Even if these guys just become career AHLers, it's still, that's pretty good. That's better than most hockey players, and at least it's worth a shot if you're the Bruins to give them that chance.
And I hate to say it like this, but all it takes is one injury, and you could be on the parent club in no time. So you never know. I think at the very least, the Bruins got two very solid depth signings for Providence, like you said, and it will be interesting to see if they make the big club because there is potential there. Now, we've talked about it. I'm not going to rant about it again, but the problem with the Bruins has been development. If these two can get developed correctly and continue to kind of go on the upward trajectory, who knows? They could find a home in Beantown.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But those are the two college signings that the Bruins have made so far. Michael Callahan, a defenseman from Providence College, and Mark Mclaughlin, a forward from Boston College. And we'll probably be seeing them very, very soon in a Providence Bruins uniform. And then beyond that, obviously, we'll have to wait and see. Next up, trade deadline. This is obviously, the biggest thing going on around the NHL right now. Same for the Bruins. Lots of rumors, lots of expectations that the Bruins are going to be making moves at the trade deadline this year. We've already seen some moves made. Colorado has gotten in on the action early, trading for Josh Manson and also bringing in Nico Sturm from Minnesota. Calgary made their big move way earlier in the season in the Tyler Toffoli trade. We're getting down now to the last few days before the trade deadline. Obviously, we're expecting the action to really pick up as far as trades are concerned. And Boston is heavily involved in these. So what I've got here, I have the top 50 trade targets from Frank Saravelli of Daily Faceoff pulled up here. And we're going to take a look at some of the names that Boston has been linked to and just kind of talk about those players, if you would like the Bruins to be in on those players, and just overall, what kind of impact that could have on the Bruins if they were to make a trade for any of these guys. So going through the list here, number one on the trade target list, obviously, is Claude Giroux from the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, I think there's a very, very slim to almost no chance of the Bruins actually landing Claude Giroux. However, they have been kind of thrown out there as a potential suitor for Giroux. He can play center or wing. I don't think it's necessarily Boston's biggest need is a guy like Giroux as a center, but obviously there's been a lot of talk about the Bruins and getting getting a true second line center to play behind Bergeron. This to me feels like an absolute pipe dream. Like, this isn't going to happen, but then it has been thrown out there. So what do you think about Giroux, and is this anything that's even realistic?
No, I would say no. I would love Giroux, first of all. He has 42 points so far this year. He had 43 in total last year. At 34 years old, he's still putting up pretty solid numbers. I don't think it's realistic. I would love him in Boston. I really would. He would give a nice veteran presence, some more depth as the Bruins try to compete with some of these top-tier teams in the Eastern Conference. And I would love him here, but I don't think it's realistic. Mm-hmm. I really don't.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a pipe dream type move. I don't think it's going to happen, but certainly, if the Bruins were to land Claude Giroux, that'd be a massive, massive deal. I think that other teams have better assets that they can send back to Philadelphia as a return, so they would basically outbid the Bruins.
Right.
And I also feel like Boston they're going to be out there trying to. I don't think Giroux's high on their list as far as like priority goes. I think they've got other guys that they're trying to make a move for and maybe not be as expensive as Giroux is going to be as well. So I just don't see that happening, but it has been thrown out there. Somebody that I think is a lot more realistic and a lot more of a potential move here would be Hampus Lindholm, defenseman from the Anaheim Ducks. He's a pending free agent, left shot, 28 years old, making $5.2 million. Obviously, defenseman is an area that I've been saying for weeks now that I think the Bruins need to add a D. I would love for it to be a top 4 guy. I think, you can maybe settle for a depth guy like a Jacob Middleton or something like that. But if they really want to make a splash and improve the team and make themselves a legitimate threat for a Stanley Cup, I think they need a top 4 defenseman. And Hampus Lindholm certainly fits the bill. And definitely a guy that a lot of teams are going to be asking about. Anaheim has pretty much already proven that they're going to be selling by trading Josh Manson to Colorado. So Hampus Lindholm, this is a guy that I would love to see the Bruins get.
Absolutely. He's 28 years old. He is a pending free agent, but the Bruins have had luck in acquiring players at the deadline and then signing them to longer contracts. See Taylor Hall, for example.
Mm-hmm.
This would help out the Bruins' depth immediately. In a game that is getting faster, meaning hockey in general, having that younger body on the defensive line for depth and continuing to add to that depth defensively is extremely important. I would love to see him here. He isn't necessarily known as a defenseman that could put up points. He has 17 so far this season, but in terms of a defenseman, for me at least, I don't know about you, I would rather see solid defensive play with the offensive play being more of a bonus.
Yeah, and he's not a Norris Trophy level guy. He's not a huge offensive producer, but he can still put some points in. And
yeah,
I think he's a guy that would certainly improve the Bruins offensively as well as defensively. And I think that'd just be a big upgrade for Boston if they could pull off a move like that. Want to see, he has 17 points this year. I want to see where that would rank among Bruins defensemen. So I'm pulling up the stats quick here. So he'd be 3rd on the team in points if he was a Boston Bruin.
Okay.
Charlie McAvoy and Matt Grzelcyk are the only D-men with more than 17 points on the Bruins. So he would be 3rd on the team in offensive production if he were to come to Boston. I mean, I like Hampus Lindholm. I think he's a very solid guy. He's definitely going to get a raise when his contract is up at the end of this year. He's going to be making probably $6 to $6.5 million a year. So I don't know if Boston would be able to re-sign him without, getting rid of somebody else. But at least for a playoff run, he's a top 4 guy, a legitimate top 4 guy, and a guy that would definitely significantly improve the Bruins.
And, depending on the moves you make down the road, you would have a chance to resign him. I would love to have him here, if only for the stretch run. Because he is 28, he is theoretically entering, the prime of his career. This isn't like a 34-year-old defenseman, depth defenseman. This is a player that is, in the prime of his career. And I would love to have him here. I really would. I think he would help shore up that defense.
Yeah, absolutely. So another guy now, another center, and this is somebody that Boston has been linked to much more aggressively than Claude Giroux, and that's Tomas Hurdle from the San Jose Sharks. Hurdle's name has been mentioned in the same sentence as Boston pretty much all season long, actually even going back to before this season as well. But looking, obviously at that second line center spot, do the Bruins want to go out and get a true 2C? And Tomas Hurdle's a guy that has been very, very much talked about, possibly being traded by San Jose. Again, pending unrestricted free agent at the end of the year, $5.625 million AAV, 28 years old. Hurdle seems like a much more realistic option than Giroux as a second-line center. Is this something that you think Boston's in on, or do you think that all the talk about him is just kind of a rumor without much substance behind it?
Speaking from my sports fandom and also writing about a lot of rumors in regards to acquisitions in any sport, usually when a team is heavily linked to a player, it often doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see Hurdle here again because he's 28 years old. In the prime of his career, he would give the Bruins that depth at center. Like, just generally speaking, to me, depth is an important thing to address if you're going for a playoff stretch run here and deep into the playoffs theoretically.
Yeah.
So Hurdle would definitely provide that type of depth. He has 4 points in his last 2 games, so he's on a little bit of a hot streak right now, and I would really like to have him here. Again, if it's only for the stretch run, if the Bruins can resign him in the offseason, if they acquire him, that would be great. But I think he would be a good fit, and I think that he would at least give the organization depth in terms of production and experience.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, he's definitely a guy that, again, would be an upgrade for the Bruins. Don't know if Boston's going to be willing to pay the price that it's going to cost to get a guy like Tomas Hurdle, but if they are, he would certainly be a huge upgrade to the team right now, no doubt about it. Another name on the wing that's been coming up a lot is Ricard Raquel, also from the Anaheim Ducks. He's 28 years old. He's a pending UFA. Pretty reasonable cap hit at just $3.789 million. And there's been a lot of talk that if DeBrusk gets moved out, they're obviously going to need to bring in a winger for him to replace that spot in the lineup. And Ricard Raquel could very well be that guy. His cap hit is pretty similar to DeBrusk, so it's not going to be a huge money issue there. And Raquel has been linked to Boston, I feel like, for the last 3 years. But could this finally be the year that a deal actually gets done and the Bruins bring in Ricard Raquel on the wing?
I would like this a lot because if you look at his numbers, and I don't have Jake DeBrusk's numbers in front of me right now, but Ricard Raquel has 16 goals and 12 assists for 28 points. I want to say those numbers are pretty comparable to what DeBrusk is bringing right now.
Yeah, DeBrusk has 15 goals and 10 assists for 25 points.
Okay, so I think that I would like Raquel here, and I think that especially when you look at, smaller market teams like the Ducks, for instance, the cap hit isn't necessarily going to be a ton of money.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that Raquel would be a good fit, and, he would give the Bruins offense at that wing spot. I don't know if he adds much more than DeBrusk with the way DeBrusk is playing right now.
Mm-hmm.
But given the fact that DeBrusk is so streaky, I think this would be a worthy investment for the Bruins if they're able to lock him up long term.
Yeah, I think that that Raquel's a guy that you could just kind of flip for DeBrusk, and they have similar numbers this year. I think Raquel, I don't know. I feel like I trust Raquel to give a little bit more consistent offense, especially he honestly hasn't been that great the last few years numbers wise, but Anaheim hasn't been that great. I think on a better team, Raquel could get back to being that 20-25 goal guy that he used to be. And I trust him to be a little bit more consistent, I think, than DeBrusk. DeBrusk has proven that he's a very streaky, inconsistent player. Yeah, he might go on a stretch where he scores, 7 goals in 7 games, but then he's going to follow that up with no goals in the next 8 games. So, I think, DeBrusk obviously wants out. I think this would be a good opportunity for them to just move DeBrusk out and bring in Raquel, who could be a direct replacement. And you could, maybe get a little bit more out of Raquel potentially, but at least a little bit more consistency, I would think.
Well, to me, again, this certain situation, especially with Raquel, reminds me of Taylor Hall in the sense that if you put the right guys around him and let the game come to him and allow him to play in that, in the role that he's comfortable in, he could really succeed. With Taylor Hall, we've seen him become, and he's always been this way, but more of an assist man for Boston instead of the goal scorer that many thought he would be. If you add Raquel to the Bruins and put him on the right line and put him in a spot where he's comfortable, I could see him really having success.
Yeah, I mean, if they bring in Raquel, he's going right to that Bergeron-Marchand line on the right side.
There you
and
go.
I think he's scoring a lot more than 12 goals playing with those two guys,
Absolutely.
So I think you got a big opportunity there for him to up his production and really be a difference maker.
And that also gives you youth on that line. I mean, obviously Bergeron and Marchand are still playing at an extremely high level.
Mm-hmm.
Even at their ages, although Marchand's really not that old, but in hockey years he's old.
Yeah.
But when you look at, again, the playoffs, you want to have fresh legs on the ice all the time. You also want to have your best players on the ice all the time.
Yeah.
And having a combination of a younger scoring threat in Raquel with, proven, superstars, but older in Bergeron and Marchand, I think that would be a good mix as the Bruins try to keep up with what is a very talented Eastern Conference playoff field.
Yeah, I agree as well. So that'd be a move that I would definitely be in on the Bruins making. All right, next guy here who's number 10 on Frank Saravelli's list. We've talked a lot about him. It's Jakob Chychrun. So I don't want to put a ton more time into this because in past episodes we've talked a lot about Chychrun. But I think we're both in agreement that this would be a monster move for the Bruins. We both would love to see Chychrun come to Boston. He's got 3 more years left on his contract. He's only 23 years old. And he's a legitimate top guy to play with Charlie McAvoy. Like I would honestly consider putting. Well, you could put Chychrun with Carlo actually, and Chychrun be the offensive guy, and Carlo be the defensive guy.
That'd be nice.
Or if you wanted to stack your top pair, then obviously you could put him with McAvoy. But honestly, now that I think about it, I'd rather keep Grzelcyk with McAvoy because they play really well together. And then put Chychrun with Carlo, and holy cow, what a top 4 that would be.
Yeah. To me, it all comes down to the price tag. I think Arizona is going to want a lot, as they should. And although I would love to have him here, so yes, I would love to have him here, but I see it as a pipe dream.
Yeah, I do too. I see this even more so a pipe dream than Giroux, honestly. Like this would be something that, it could happen, and we'd be super happy if it did, but I feel like the likelihood of it is very, very small.
Because again, it comes down to the teams that have assets, and more teams have assets than the Bruins right now, and that definitely works against them when it comes to trying to land big name players via trade.
Yeah, I agree, man. If I'm a team like LA and I have all these young prospects that are highly touted prospects down in the minors, man, I'm offering Arizona like 2 of those guys, my first round pick this year, maybe even my first round pick next year as well, to land Jakob Chychrun. Because boy, would Chychrun be a massive addition to a team like the Kings, who are already on the upswing, and he would just take them to that next level just like that. I feel like there are other teams around the league that can probably offer more for Chychrun, but boy, would it be incredible if Boston could somehow land him.
Yeah, a team like LA, who has kind of exceeded expectations this year, adding Chychrun to the Kings would definitely
that'd be so good.
Yeah, that would be. And that would definitely make their kind of, I don't want to say rebuild, but their development process as a team move a lot quicker. So I could honestly see him going there.
All right, next up, we got another possible center, possible wing, wherever you want to put him. Versatile forward, Andrew Copp from the Winnipeg Jets. He's a pending UFA, making $3.64 million, 27 years old. Obviously, again, pretty comparable to money-wise to Jake DeBrusk. So if you were to send DeBrusk out, you could bring in Copp without having to worry about money. This is a guy that I would love to see in a Bruins uniform. Just an all-around really solid player. He's good defensively. He can kill penalties. He also adds some offense. I'm a big fan of Andrew Copp's game. This would not be, the same level of move as like a Tomas Hurdle or a Claude Giroux. I think this would be more down in the Ricard Raquel type category. But this is another guy that if Boston's going to add up front, I would not be upset if they brought in Andrew Copp.
Yeah, when you look at his statistics, I mean, he's played at a consistent level throughout his entire career. He currently has 32 points this year. He had 39 last year,
Mm-hmm.
and he would be great as, another depth piece because he can move the puck. He's got size at 6'1", 206 pounds. And, if I'm the Bruins and I'm looking for depth,
Mm-hmm.
I think he would be a really, really solid addition.
Yeah, I agree. I think he would definitely be an upgrade to the Bruins. They'd play in somewhere in the middle part of that lineup, I would imagine. And he's just such a solid all around player. He's not a guy that necessarily jumps off of the screen and really sticks out like a superstar, but is just really solid in all three zones, all over the ice. And I think Boston would definitely be a better team with a guy like that in the lineup.
You know what you're going to get from him, right? He's
Yep.
dependable. He's consistent. You know what type of game he plays. So I think this would be a good get for the Bruins for sure because you know what you're getting from him, and he can put up points. So that's a bonus.
All right, now there's a couple of kind of depth defensemen I want to talk about. That again, if you don't get Chychrun, you're not able to land a big piece on the back end. You're going to try and settle more for just a depth piece at this point, bottom pair type guy. We've got Carson Soucy from the Seattle Kraken. He's got one more year left on his contract at $2.75 million. He's a left shot defenseman. And he's had an okay year in Seattle. He came originally from Minnesota. He had a couple of pretty solid seasons in Minnesota, and then Seattle took him in the expansion draft. Soucy again, kind of more of a depth type guy, but still a decently younger player at 27. He does have term on his contract. And, I just think, if you're not going to get one of the big guys, this could be a guy that could be a decent addition.
And he seems like he's more of an assist guy, right? He had 16 assists in 2020, 2021, and, he could be a decent addition. I mean, when you look at expansion teams, right, and you look at teams that are struggling, like the Arizona Coyotes, or an expansion team like the Seattle Kraken, it's hard to find success. It's hard to find individual success and put up numbers when you're still trying to gel as a team, right?
Yeah.
And so, even though he's had, not a down year this year, he has 14 points. He's not the splash that we, with some of the names we just talked about.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't mind bringing him in. I don't think he's going to be, making headlines in the Boston Globe every day.
No.
But I think that he could be a decent piece on the back end as the Bruins just try to look to fill that out a little bit more.
Yeah, another depth D man that's kind of along the same lines, I think, is Colin Miller, old friend Colin Miller, who's already been a Bruin back in the day, and then has kind of gone to a few different teams since then. Now with Buffalo, 29 years old, last year of his contract, making $3.875 million. Definitely think the Sabres would be willing to retain salary on that for the rest of this year. But Miller's a guy that recently, just over the last day or so, has been linked to Boston as a possible depth add. He's a right shot D-man as opposed to a left shot guy like Middleton or Soucy. So, what are your just overall thoughts? Could Colin Miller be coming back to Boston and maybe trying to take that bottom pair right side role?
He is certainly intriguing, right? Because when he was with Las Vegas, we saw him break out a little bit more as a playmaker.
He had a 41-point season with Vegas.
I was just about to say he had a 41-point season, and so I would definitely be interested in having him back. I mean, it's not like he's an older player either.
Mm-hmm.
He's 29. He's in the prime of his career, so to speak, and so I wouldn't mind having him back. This wouldn't be like a must get for me. I mean, but I wouldn't mind having him back. He's already familiar with the Bruins organization, and he could be a nice option. What did you say his cap hit was?
3.875.
That's not awful, right? I'm not too familiar with hockey contracts, but that's not a terrible number, right?
It's a little high for him,
high?
but again,
Yeah.
I think Buffalo would retain salary on that.
Yeah, so he could be a nice option. I'm not doing backflips over him, but I would like to have him back as the Bruins again try to add depth defensively.
Okay, so one last one here, and this one's kind of off the board. This is not something that is being talked about really, or anything that I've kind of heard yet, but it's a really intriguing option to me. We know that if the Bruins trade Jake DeBrusk, they need a right wing. They need another winger, somebody to bring in. Kasperi Kapanen from the Pittsburgh Penguins, former Toronto Maple Leafs, 25 years old. He's an RFA at the end of this season. He's making $3.2 million, which is pretty close to what DeBrusk is making. And Kasperi Kapanen is having a horrible year in Pittsburgh this year. Not really sure why. Not really sure what's up with him. But he was healthy scratched in a game last week. His numbers just have not been good. He's had a really bad year. Could the Bruins take a run at Kapanen and just try and get like a change of scenery for Kapanen? We know DeBrusk wants a change of scenery. Could the Bruins make a move like this and then try and sign him as an RFA at the end of the year? He's only 25, and I feel like there's a lot of upside here. There's a lot of upside if he does work out.
You know, it's interesting to me to see, because with Toronto in 2018, 2019, he had 44 points, and his point totals have been going down since then.
Yeah.
I mean, he is only 25, so that is certainly an intriguing piece of the equation for me. But for this one, I'm going to say no. Trending downward at age 25, I get that there's certain situations that don't work out for players, and there's certain situations where, players thrive in a little bit better. But trending downward is a little bit of a red flag to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and when you think his ceiling is 44 points, let's say it is for the sake of argument, I don't know if I would want a player that, 44 points is good, but if you're continuing to move down statistically, I wouldn't make a deal for Kapanen, no.
The only way that I would make this deal is if I'm just giving up Jake DeBrusk.
Yeah.
If you want DeBrusk for Kapanen 1-1, sure, I'll do that all day. At least give the kid a shot. Give both kids a shot to kind of, just get in different lineups and see if they can get back on track. That I am not giving up anything more than Jake DeBrusk for Kasperi Kapanen. Because like you said, there's too many red flags. And honestly, Kapanen isn't that different than Jake DeBrusk. He's a streaky player that a lot of times has gone missing way too much. And that's what's happened this year with Pittsburgh. Is that he's just disappeared.
Yeah, and a lot of times in sports today in general, you don't see player-for-player deals.
Mm-hmm.
So I would almost be willing to bet that we would maybe have to give something else to Toronto, and I wouldn't want to do it. Yeah, I would not do that either.
No, if Pittsburgh wants to do Kapanen, DeBrusk 1-1, just flip-flop them, I'm perfectly fine with that, but I am not giving up anything more than Jake DeBrusk for somebody who is pretty much kind of the same thing, very similar, just hoping that the change of scenery will help him reach his ceiling a little bit more than he is right now with the Penguins.
I am in complete agreement with you, and we talked about players going to teams where there's playmakers and making them better.
Mm-hmm.
You have tons of playmakers on the Penguins. If you can't succeed there, then that is a red flag to me too as well, because they do have a ton of playmakers.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Not being good on Pittsburgh is a red flag because that team scores a lot of goals and has a lot of talent. So if you're not putting up points on the Penguins, there's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say no on this one, and
I
I think
agree.
you're in agreement with me.
Yeah, again, the only way I would say yes to that is if I'm not giving up anything more than DeBrusque, and then
Mm,
I'm fine with that. But anything more, I'm out on Kapanen. That's
yeah, me
just
too.
no one's really talking about that. That's just an interesting one because he has been so bad for Pittsburgh that trade rumors have started to come up about Pittsburgh possibly trying to dump Kapanen. Um, so I figured with the Bruins looking for a right wing, that was a name on the list, but I don't see that as anything that's likely to happen or even close to that.
No, I don't either. And I think the Bruins probably have to give up more than DeBrusque, and I would not want to do that either.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so there's our trade deadline talk. Obviously, we're going to have to wait and see what happens. Got to imagine that Boston's going to be making some sort of moves, but we don't know exactly what yet. It's going to be interesting to see what happens at the deadline this year. I think there's going to be quite a few smaller moves, but I think some of the bigger names may not end up being involved in deals. I think there's going to be some guys on that list that are kind of big names that just end up staying put where they are.
We may have a busy summer, and it may
Yeah,
make for some good summer content.
yeah.
So for our sake, let's hope that they wait until the summer.
But anyway, now I obviously with the trade deadline stuff want to move on. We're going to talk about the last few games for the Bruins because they've played 3 games since our last episode. They've played Chicago at home back on last Thursday night. They played at home against the Arizona Coyotes on Saturday, and they just played last night, Tuesday, against the Blackhawks again, this time in Chicago. And Boston won all 3 games, all by 1 goal as well. 4-3 against Chicago, 3-2 against Arizona, and then 2-1 in overtime against Chicago in the game in Chicago. So 3-0 over the last 3 games here for Boston. Obviously, no complaints there. They continue to roll along. Boston is now 8-1-1 in their last 10 games. This team is playing great hockey right now.
They are playing great hockey, and I love to see them be on the receiving end of last-second wins as opposed to giving up last-second goals.
Yes, I wanted to talk about that because last week all we did was talk about how they were giving up these late goals. Losing to Anaheim in the final seconds, giving up the tying goal to LA in the final seconds, giving up a tying goal to Columbus in the final seconds. Finally, they flipped the script, and in the first game against Chicago at home on Thursday, they scored with 17 seconds left in the game and won it 4-3 with a last-second goal.
They did, and I was very impressed with the energy that Chicago brought in this game. You're talking about a younger team who doesn't have a ton to play for right now, but they brought it on Thursday, and the Bruins were able to, find a way to win, and they were able to squeak one out. And we've talked about this before. The teams that don't have anything to play for at this time of year are usually the tougher opponents.
Yeah, they're the dangerous ones because they're so loose and they're out there. They're just playing hockey. Like it doesn't matter if they make a mistake. It doesn't matter if they mess up. They're not going to the playoffs anyway. So they can just they have this nothing to lose attitude where they just go out there and play, and it makes them really dangerous to play against because, they just kind of have that reckless abandon of just trying to see if they can pull off an upset. And sometimes they do, but luckily Boston has not succumbed to any of those teams here recently. And, they did it again with another 1-goal win on Saturday. Again, a little bit tighter maybe than what you were hoping for, but Arizona was playing very, very well going into that game. Absolutely destroying opponents, scoring a ton of goals. Boston held them to just 2 goals and was able to still pull out the win against a team that was playing very, very well.
2 goals by Craig Smith. He's really picked up his offensive game lately. He has turned it
on here.
He really has. And, I was impressed with Arizona. They were very strong off the rush. They did a nice job of entering the zone. I believe Trent Frederick had, a point in this one. And there was this line for Arizona that I was really impressed with. It was Clayton Keller and Oh God, what was the other one? Clayton Keller, and I'm looking at my notes here. Oh, Schmaltz.
Oh yeah, Nick Schmaltz. Yeah, they've
Yeah,
been
Nick Schmaltz.
racking up points.
That is a very impressive line for the Coyotes there. I was very impressed with Clayton Keller because I usually don't get to watch a lot of these West Coast teams. And then Charlie Coyle had a beautiful backhand goal on the left side that was the game winner, and he too has been picking up his offensive production.
Yeah, absolutely. Secondary scoring continues for the Bruins, and that's obviously a great sign because they're going to need it come playoff time. But again, Arizona, you look at that game on the schedule and you're like, oh, the Bruins, way better than the Coyotes. They should destroy them. That shouldn't even be a close game. But Arizona had been winning going into that game. I think they had won 4 in a row going into that game. They had been scoring a ton of goals. Schmaltz and Keller have been racking up points. And Boston still got the job done. They got the 2 points. They found a way to win. And, that's pretty much all you can ask is find a way to win. And that's what they were able to do.
Swayman also played well in this game, I thought. The Coyotes were quick. They were firing shots. They were another team that was playing like they had nothing to lose, and it made for a really entertaining game. And Swayman stood firm in the net and, took all the Coyotes gave to him. And overall, I thought this was another really solid, gritty win for the Bruins.
Yeah, completely agree as well. So, final game of this last little stretch here, 2-1 overtime win for the Bruins against the Chicago Blackhawks in Chicago. But that does not tell the whole story because this was a Marc-Andre Fleury show in this game. Boston finishes with 48 shots on goal, and Fleury stops 46 of them. Chicago only managed 20 shots. The Bruins could have easily won this game like 6-1, but Marc-Andre Fleury steals the show. It ends up going to overtime, but the Bruins again still find a way to win and get the 2 points.
And honestly, good for Marc-Andre Fleury. I always felt bad the way Vegas kind of treated him and, kind of traded him away. So I'm glad to see he's kind of finding his groove in Chicago. But the Bruins, I think I had this one as a loss in last week's predictions.
Yeah.
Because they were on the road. And, Chicago is another team, just like Arizona, that has played the Bruins tough. And, the Bruins were able to, get the victory and on the road at the United Center. And I thought this was really kind of the icing on the cake of what has been a really solid, gritty, stretch for Boston, playoff type atmosphere, close games that they are going to need to continue to win. It's a nice dress rehearsal for what may be coming down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt, it's just every time you can get the 2 points, that's huge. And Boston now is actually catching Toronto in the standings. Boston is only 2 points behind the Maple Leafs with the same number of games played. They are catching Toronto and honestly do have a chance to take third place depending on how the rest of this season goes. And Boston and Toronto still have games against each other this year. So those head-to-head matchups are going to be huge as well.
And I think even me and you last week thought that them catching Toronto was kind of unlikely, but now it's looking not likely, but a better chance of doing so.
Very real possibility.
That just goes to show you that we shouldn't bet in Vegas because we've been wrong about a lot on the show, and we'll be happy to admit it. I'm happy to eat crow.
Yeah, I'm glad that the Bruins are playing this well. I mean, 3-0-0 over these last 3 games, and nothing to complain about there.
Yeah, which is rare for us.
Yeah, 6 out of 6 points. So, speaking of 6 out of 6 points, we want to look ahead now to the upcoming schedule, and we kind of included the Minnesota's game, which is tonight, in last week's episode because you guys aren't going to be seeing this until Friday. So we'll talk about, there's really only 2 games coming up. There's a little bit of a break here for Boston where they play Winnipeg on Friday night, March 18th, and then they play Montreal on March 21st, Monday night. Both of those games are on the road. Then they've got a couple of days off, and they actually have 2 days off between the Winnipeg and Montreal game as well. So only 2 games in the next, let's see. After they play Minnesota on Wednesday, they have 2 games and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2 games in 7 days. So they have a little bit of a break in the schedule here. Winnipeg on Friday night. Jets have been a big-time underachiever this year. But still in the playoff race out west. If you look at the Western Conference standings, the playoff cut line right now, let me pull up the wild card here. Playoff cut line is at 68 points, which currently the Vegas Golden Knights hold. The last playoff spot was 68 points. Winnipeg is at 66, just 2 points behind Vegas for that last playoff spot. So they're very much in the playoff race in the Western Conference, as well as Dallas, Vancouver, Anaheim, Vegas, Edmonton, all of those teams. So a lot to play for here if you're the Jets. However, they have been overly pretty much a disappointment this year. Not going to be an easy game on the road for the Bruins. Them and the Jets usually play pretty tough games against each other, but definitely a game that the Bruins could win. I think Boston is the better team.
I do too, but you look at, Winnipeg is right now on a 2-game winning streak, and they actually beat the Golden Knights by a 7-3 score yesterday.
They crushed Vegas last night.
I don't know what's up with Vegas. I mean,
they stink.
They do stink, but they have so much talent,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Not
it's
going
weird.
well for them.
It's weird, but anyway, so I don't think this is going to be an easy game at all for the Bruins. I mean, you talk about teams that are, playing hockey, having fun, and making the games tight. This Winnipeg team is a team that's desperate for the playoffs and are trying to fight for their hockey lives. So I'm not sure how this game is going to go. I think the Bruins will win it in regulation, but I think it's going to be a gritty West Coast game. The last time these two teams played, that's exactly what it was, and I don't think that's going to change. So I'm going to give 2 points for Friday.
All right, then Monday night, they are in Montreal playing against their arch rival, the Canadiens. Now, certainly Montreal is one of the worst teams in the NHL this season. However, since they made the coaching change and brought in Marty St. Louis, they've been playing a heck of a lot better. And they're starting to get some real serious production out of Cole Caulfield. Their younger players are playing better. And they're up to 16 wins on the year now. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10 games. Montreal might not be such a gimme this time around.
No, and I loved Marty St. Louis growing up.
Yep.
I really did.
I did too.
I believe he played at Vermont.
He did.
And it was fun to follow his collegiate progress there. But anyway, when just looking at things from a Montreal perspective, if you have players like Cole Caulfield, a great young player, and you pair him with a great NHL legend who knows how to win games, and Marty St. Louis, I think the future could potentially be extremely bright for the Canadiens. Montreal is not an easy place to win. I'm going to say the Bruins win this one in overtime. I think it's going to be one of those 2-1 low-scoring games.
Yep.
But I think the Bruins do pull it out.
Yeah, I think they definitely should beat Montreal, although going up to Bell Center is not an easy thing to do, especially with the Canadiens probably feeling pretty good about themselves, feeling quite a bit better, playing well recently. I think Boston, at some point here, is going to take a loss. I don't think they're going to win everything. The Minnesota game, I can't remember last week, but I think I was counting that one as possibly a loss because I think I said 3-1 over that 4-game stretch. So if I'll say Minnesota a loss, I'll say, and then between the Winnipeg and Montreal games, I think they win one and they lose one in overtime. So I'm going to say 1-1 over this stretch here, or 1-0-1 over this Winnipeg and Montreal stretch here. I think they might drop a game in OT, but they'll win the other one and still overall continue playing pretty well. If they can get 3 out of 4 points, then I'm happy.
I forgot what I said about the Minnesota game last week.
I think you said 2-2 last week, or 2-1-1. One of them might have been an overtime loss.
All right, so as far as with the Minnesota game included for this episode, I will say 2-0-1. I think, let's see. I'm trying to think here. Probably, I'm going to say Montreal will probably be the one on the record.
All right, well, Boston still got to keep playing well here and take advantage of the winnable games because their schedule does not get easier to close out March. And obviously, we'll talk about this in next week's show. But after that Montreal game and their couple days off, Tampa Bay, New York Islanders, and Toronto Maple Leafs are their next 3 games. So obviously, some tough battles there coming up for the Bruins. But we'll see how they finish out this road trip. They've got Minnesota Wednesday night, tonight, the day that we're recording. That will have happened by the time you guys all watching see this. Then on Friday night, they've got Winnipeg, and on Monday night, they've got Montreal, all on the road. Tough stretch here. We'll see if the Bruins can continue their winning ways. But that is going to do it now for episode 59. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Danny, as always, it was awesome to have you. Thanks for being on again, and we'll talk again next week. We'll have a whole new week of action to get into.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun, and this Bruins team is making things interesting. I'm not getting my hopes up yet, but, I'm starting to feel good about this team.
Yeah, we'll also have to, by next week, we'll know what they do at the trade deadline, so we'll have all that to talk about as well. But anyway, guys, before we go, I just want to again say thank you to Mark Allred and the entire team at Black and Gold Productions for all of their support. This show would not be happening without them. And also draw your attention again to the description of the video, the links down in the description. If you're in the market for Boston Bruins apparel, NHL apparel from any of the 32 teams, or NCAA college apparel, it's all there down in the description, so please check that out. This is the end of episode 59. Thank you guys all so much for watching. We'll be back next week. Have a great weekend, and talk to you all very, very soon.